Bates.
Member for Scarborough-Guildwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for this opportunity to speak on this important subject. I just, first of all, want to acknowledge the work of my leader, the member from Toronto Centre, who has literally changed the channel here today. And I say changed the channel for the better. Interestingly, since the motion was introduced this morning, I've had 3 very intense conversations with random people, literally, about this very subject. One of which was at lunch today with a pastor friend of mine who attended at the burial, officiated at the funeral service of 13 suicide people over the course of his pastoral career. He also cut down, he was the first on the scene for 2 people as he cut them down from their hanging. He literally says, I've cleaned up blood on the floor. I've counseled people 2 hours prior to their committing suicide. So, and he lives with that each and every day. And it affects his ministry, and it affects, of course, all of the families that are touched by suicide. And in some respects, it just never goes away. Today I'm going to take the opportunity to talk about the mental illness aspect of suicide. I don't think there's a person in this chamber that's not either directly or indirectly affected by someone in their family or close to their family who has a mental illness. My family is no exception. We've walked alongside our son for the last 10, 12 years as he's battled schizophrenia, he's battled suicide attempts, he's battled addictions. We've pretty well visited every mental health facility in the eastern Greater Toronto area. And we've been to emergency facilities, we've been to flop houses, we've been to hospitals, we've been to emergency rooms, and we've had dozens of incidents where points of heartache for our family, anger, frustration, embarrassment, all resulting from Nathan's illness. And so this is personal for us. We're a well-resourced middle-class family. We have access to some pretty good resources. In fact, Nathan's stepmother is a physician. But our family experience in some respects is no different than literally thousands of other Canadian families who are left to cope with this illness. Frankly, if it wasn't for the tireless efforts of my wife in particular, but clearly other members of the family, Nathan would be dead, maybe under some bridge or in some flop house as we speak. But mental illness, frankly, Mr. Speaker, is like no other. It literally robs you of your life while you're still breathing, because it's an alienating illness. It isolates you. It removes you from your family supports. You can't sustain work. You just simply can't sustain relationships. My honourable member from York West is reminding me that I'm splitting my time with her as we speak. Part of our incomplete response, it's very incomplete, frankly, Mr. Speaker, to those who have mental illness had to do with the deinstitutionalization that went on in the 80s or 90s. When this occurred, a lot of people were put on the street. And many of them were simply not capable of handling the street. Not all people on the street have mental illness, but it is a difficult place to be when you are fighting mental illness. Life is life is a lot more complicated than simply being on the street and having mental illness and thinking about suicide. You could really understand it. I walk to work every day along Metcalf, and there are, if you will, my regulars that I from time to time talk to. And they all, at one point, had lives. But, you know, there's the guy outside of the Starbucks at Metcalf and Queen, I think, or Albert. And you wonder about what his life was like prior to begging for money. Our experience has been with psychotic breaks. Nathan was enrolled in a post-secondary institution when he had his first psychotic break, although we may well have had previous ones that we simply didn't recognize. And when he was 19, he started to hear these voices. And sometimes the voices told him to do things that obviously were not things that could be done. Sometimes it involved harm to himself. And we've gone through that experience of arriving home and him being unconscious. But so far, touch wood, those voices have not told him to do harm to others. Nevertheless, he freaks out some people, particularly his female siblings, and causes all kinds of consternation for those who care for him the most. Probably he's more dangerous to himself than he is to others, but he causes a lot of turmoil for his caregivers. And as I say, Mr. Speaker, we're a well-resourced family, and I can only imagine for single mothers or other people who are not as well-resourced how difficult it must be for them. I must admit, Mr. Speaker, and I'll try to avoid my partisan hat here, I have a tough time with, should we say, the tough on crime agenda while I'm standing 3 hours in an emergency line trying to get help. It doesn't work. It doesn't work for me. And yet that's the point at which Nathan is most likely to commit some criminal act. You know, talking about minimum mandatories to him at that stage doesn't mean a thing. And we deal with the social services that are available to us in our community. I have to take, you know, these are the secular saints of our community. But all the time they're just scraping for resources. It's just really difficult. And again, we live in the largest city in Canada. It's not as if there aren't money. There isn't money. But the resources are very difficult to access. If his mother didn't act like his advocate because he can't or won't, and harasses people, intimidates people, yells at people, screams at people, reasons with people, and just, you know, continually gnaws at all of the resources that need to be made available, whether it's housing or psychiatric visits or medications or whatever, I dare say that we might actually be dealing with a suicide in our family. So, Mr. Speaker, this is an extraordinarily difficult issue for us. But as one of the previous speakers said, if we don't start talking about it, nothing will change. I don't think you can carry on in a civilized society like Canada and expect that if we don't actually get a hold of this issue, things will change. It won't change unless there's some will. I hope. We've done a lot of statistics here in this chamber. I hope Nathan will not become a statistic. He will never be a statistic to us. But there is that possibility. And I would Thank you.